I think we may have another shark problem.
Are you serious?
So upon looking at my analytics, I realized my Things You Didn't Know About Jaws video, that's 2 years old, was doing some monumental numbers. At first I thought it was just a coincidence, but then realized it may correspond with the 50th anniversary. It was then a director who I think is going places put together a little movie that may have had an effect on the film industry, along with a negative effect on beach sales and the overall shark population, but my belief is success should be followed up. Given it's well over 2 weeks late and my sequel video did shit for views, it only makes sense to keep that trend going.
You're an idiot!
Look, while I do believe Jaws is completely worthy of the legendary status it's gained, I don't know what I could add to that. You know me, I love finding issues with critically acclaimed movies and driving the fanboys crazy, but do you really care if Jaws makes scientific sense? The fact that sharks don't behave that way is not the kind of thing that you should stick in your thumbnail for clickbait. It doesn't matter. So when it comes to this franchise, as of right now, I find the sequels more fascinating. As in, despite ending and not having any modern installments, the drop in quality as these movies went on is legendary. A passable sequel to 3D Fuck Up and a contender for a top 10 worst movie, even the likes of Jurassic World, Alien, and Predator can't hope to contend with the universal hatred. Maybe the reason it didn't make any comebacks, but when something this prolific drops so low, you have to question, is it all deserved? Does Jaws have the worst sequels around? Are any of these overhated? Maybe something in the so bad it's good camp? Or is it just all bad? I'm gonna try to answer that in a reasonably fair manner because despite how one-sided this is, the history is, if anything, fascinating. The first one being the film that had a certain lead actor going through great lengths to avoid. To no avail.
And I know what a shark looks like because I've seen one up close. And you better do something about this one, because I don't intend to go through that hell again.
And that is ever a true statement. Similar to Jaws 1, the sequel's production was problematic, and a lot of that comes down to Roy Scheider not wanting anything to do with it. Heated exchanges with the director Janet Schwartz, and at one point even faking insanity, and even scenes in the movie hint at the fact that he doesn't want to be there. On top of that, he's not really the main focus of the movie, I'll get back to that in a minute, but the only reason he's even in this is because of contractual issues. With his co-star Richard Dreyfuss, that was not the case, and similar to Spielberg, he did not see the point in a Jaws sequel. A mentality Spielberg wouldn't always keep, but the film ended up being directed by Schwartz after director John D. Hancock proved to be unsuitable for this kind of movie. In the end, it released some mixed reviews, despite seeing praise in some categories, such as the effects and musical score by John Williams, and most notably, it temporarily became the highest-grossing sequel of all time. It is until Rocky II released in 1979, dethroning it, but I think it's safe to say that Jaws 2 is the only sequel that had a chance with anybody. Not Quentin Tarantino, he, like many, hated it. Thought the ending was ridiculous. But as far as real notable criticism, a lot of this comes down to the usual suspects. Inferior to the original by default, what sequel isn't? Very few. Doesn't have a reason to exist, that's definitely true. But if it was really, really good, like really good, nobody would say that. It's not a fair argument by itself, but it's commonly lumped in with this movie, and it's not a good argument. Maybe if you add on the only real criticism, being it copied the same formula, which it kinda does, but aside from White Shark wreaking havoc, the only real sense of been there, done that, is Brody providing common sense evidence and nobody listening. Most notably, the mayor not listening. Oddly enough, there was a deleted scene when the mayor voted to not have Brody removed after he caused a panic on the beach. If they kept this in, it would have added some depth, but instead he's just a stupid asshole who for some reason never gets bitten in the ass. Literally.
Until it swims up and bites you on the ass!
Of course, the novel did originally have the mob plot, so may have had a lot to do with it, but it's still a missed opportunity. Aside from that, I don't think it's the same movie by any means, but that's not necessarily to its benefit. One of the things I noticed the first time I watched it, and that's a while back, Brody kinda gets sidelined. Yeah, he's the only one to know the shark is the thing. He has a few notable moments, but after he gets canned, he's not in a lot of the movie. He just wanders about the ocean in his boat. Eventually he saves the day because he has to. But if for some reason you watch this movie without seeing the original, it's somewhat obvious he's only in it because he has to be. It seems the focus is more on his kids, Mike and Sean, but similar to his dad, Mike, the older kid, sits out most of the action. In the beginning, he's given plenty of screen time, mainly being defiant. And again, his dad could have explained to him why he couldn't go out boating all summer. I'd probably sneak out too. But upon the shark appearing, he's knocked out immediately, just barely saved, and that's all he does. His two friends take him and only him to safety, some reason leaving the only little kid behind. But that means Sean is the only member of the Brody family to be in most of the latter half. To this day, I don't know why that's done. Sean isn't that interesting. Not that Mike is that fascinating either. But he did take his little brother out boating when he wasn't supposed to, and doesn't even witness any of the chaos. And even when things go bad, he's knocked out immediately. If he died, he probably wouldn't feel it. And because of this, we only have a lot of teenagers to experience the eventful stuff, and I think it goes without saying, they're not that interesting either. One issue is there's way too many, very few are remotely likable. Aside from the girl who was nice to Sean and somebody who wasn't even with them, nobody else dies here. Yeah, Sean watching her die right in front of him was one of the better death scenes in the franchise, but obviously the idea of a high body count wasn't as much of a thing back then. Not that it really needs to be, but given nobody's that memorable, it would have kept things somewhat interesting. Case in point, without Brody in most of the latter half, and Sean being the only important character, it's always stood out as one of the movie's most notable issues. The thing is, I don't think there's that many other issues, well, aside from Mike and Sean's ages making no sense, given when this takes place. But I think what many people don't consider about this movie are the scenes that don't feel like imitations. The scuba diving scene has always been a favorite of mine, one of the franchise's scarier moments. Don't tell me you saw that coming. Despite only having the non-memorable teenagers to focus on, watching the boats collide is still exciting. And despite most of them making it, the movie does have a decent kill count. The washed up body is an unexpectedly tense scene. You kind of expect the shark to show up, the pacing is great here. The helicopter pilot is a bit ridiculous, but still a fun, chaotic moment. And the boat explosion is one of the most overlooked death scenes in the entire franchise. You think it's just gonna be the skier on the back, but then you realize it's not over. And even though nobody thought she would make it, you didn't think she was gonna pour gasoline on it, set herself on fire, and die in a huge explosion. It's a surprisingly dark fate for an irrelevant character, and the scene actually is relevant because the shark is permanently scarred. Again, it makes this Jaws look unique. No other movie has that. And it's one of the things nobody talks about when they pass the movie off as a not as good sequel. I know Tarantino doesn't like the ending, and I'll admit it is a bit stupid, but let's keep in mind every other Jaws movie, and probably lots of shark imitation movies, ends with the shark being blown up. Even Sharknado, as in the Sharknado being blown up, if that counts. But in Jaws 2 is tricked into biting into a cable and dies of electrocution. And it looks like this. No, it's just overtanned. Despite how crazy it looks, it's still an undeniably fun climax, and the only real issue is, we've already talked about, Brody isn't in enough of it. For that reason, when he comes in now, it feels undeserved. He hasn't seen the shark until now, and the thing to do would have been to have Mike not get knocked out and play some kind of role in this scene. At the same time, have Brody do more throughout the movie, and for the climax, maybe have them kill the shark as a team. That would have made more sense and completely fixed the movie's biggest issue, but instead Brody's only the hero because the plot needs him to be. I don't know if that relates to him not wanting to be in it, but unfortunately sidelining your lead is an issue that's very hard to go unnoticed. At least with something like, I don't know, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, it gives us someone real entertaining, that being Johnny Depp. Don't get me wrong, it's still a mess of a movie, but with lines like this.
I can't see. Fuck Mook, I have no eyes.
Well, it's a little difficult for me to tell right now because I'm kind of having a bad day. Do you see someone?
Who even needs a plot? But in this case, we don't have Johnny Depp, or Defoe, or Trejo, or Rourke, so it just leaves us confused. All that said, I stand by Jaws 2 being a pretty decent sequel. Definitely not as good as the original, and I guess not needed, but in the end, what sequel is? It may not be a hated movie, but I think fans expected too much going forward, and in the end it doesn't matter because, well, let's just say 3D didn't fix it. To address the elephant in the room, Jaws 3, among other issues, is the film that tried to be 3D. Because that was the thing to do in 1983, unfortunately there were no 3D televisions until the year 2000, so they retitled it Jaws 3 for home media. Unfortunately, the 3D effects were
A disaster.
as apparent very early on. This movie looks terrible, and given you can't see it in 3D today, you get this. Obviously, it's laughably bad. I don't even know what to say about it, just look at it. But in this case, let's just say it's what they tried to do, that made this happen, and move on. A bit of history that makes a lot of sense to me. This movie was originally going to be titled Jaws 3 People Zero, being a Jaws spoof. It would have been produced by Maddie Simmons, who produced National Lampoon's Animal House, and even had the first two movies' producers, David Brown and Richard Zanuck, as executive producers. It was also projected to star Bo Derek and even Richard Dreyfuss. I have a hard time believing that. But a number of things led to this not happening, one being Brown and Zanuck wanted a PG rating and Universal wanted more gruesome stuff. Usually it's the other way around, not to mention creative differences. But the most notable thing is Steven Spielberg telling Universal, if you make this, I'm done with you for good. The thing is, I can't really see Jaws 3 People Zero being less of a joke than the movie we got. I question if it turned out for the better. Production designer for the first two movies, Joe Alves, became the man to direct. And yeah, they did try to get Roy Scheider back on board, and to that he said they knew not to ask. He actually took a role in the movie Blue Thunder just to make sure it didn't happen. I've never seen that, I'm sure it's great. And this time the focus is on Michael and Sean Brody, played by Dennis Quaid and John Putch. The former spent most of the movie high on cocaine. I don't blame him. How they got Dennis Quaid, who knows? But let's just get down to it. Is Jaws 3D anything but bad effects? I would say that's not just the face of it, it's also bad in almost every other way possible. At the end of the day, the only question really is this movie so bad it's good? Is there some fun to be had in Jaws 3? Well, I still don't think so. Even if the movie looked fantastic, you've got to keep in mind, for the first 30 minutes of an hour-and-a-half movie, nothing really happens. It's mostly about the two brothers and their love interests. We got this famous British guy and his friend, they do some stuff. And aside from the occasional bad 3D kill, it's just uninteresting people doing mostly nothing. The whole SeaWorld thing had potential to go somewhere, but it boils down to people get locked in, eventually get rescued, that's about it. And when stuff eventually does happen, it's not that good. There's a scene when they literally get saved by dolphins. That's cool. Not really. We have the bullshit concept about saving the white shark, which goes wrong very quickly. Winds up dead almost immediately. The mother is pissed off. And what follows is a weird scene meant to replicate Mayhem, but not really. Randomly fighting with people, crashing the concessions car. Like I said, replicating Mayhem. And the outcome is a really badly put together movie. Nobody really dies either. Sean's quote-unquote love interest almost does, and then he just leaves the movie. Why somebody like her or Calvin, who got the shark killed, couldn't have died is beyond me. Calvin miraculously lives while some other black guy randomly gets killed. Granted, he was meant to die, but apparently they liked him, so kill off a nobody instead, I guess. And in the end, the only other character to actually die is Phillips, the British guy. And tell me if this looks right to you. Okay, so there is reasoning. It's because they eventually pull the pin on his grenade to kill the shark, so he has to be in the shark's mouth in that position, but How did that happen? How did he end up down the shark's throat without being killed? Just how? I guess I missed a lesson on white sharks having extra back teeth, but his friend's reaction may be the best part of the movie. It's kind of hard to make out what he's saying. Personally, I believe it's him realizing what he agreed to be into, and they just want you to think he's talking about Phillips. That's just my view. But the bit of creativity with that grenade doesn't make up for how this ending looks. You've all seen it, them staring at the shark approaching as it breaks through the 3D glass. Some things are so funny, you can't help but like it. That said, there's way too much boring nonsense, too many characters doing nothing, too many thrown together scenes to call this a so bad it's good movie. I'd like to say that and not go with the common opinion, but in the end, the only real good thing about Jaws 3 is it's short. It's like they literally knew they had nothing going and just got the thing done with. Very few movies could scream that sentiment more. I know this isn't the most new or interesting analysis, but despite my best efforts, I can't deny the fact that this franchise hasn't come back for a reason. I also can't call it the worst movie because it's not. It just has the worst effects, and that's for a reason, but it's definitely the least engaging. I say that because The Revenge, despite being even worse, at least had an idea. Not a good idea, and maybe one of the worst ideas in bad sequel history, but at least it makes it more interesting than bad effects ever could. Before we go on, consider hitting the like button, it's down below, it helps a great deal, and subscribing is an option too if you're enjoying. The gaming channel is also an option for the same content with games, link in the description.
Come on, can't believe that voodoo. Sharks don't commit murder, they don't pick out a person.
It picked out Sean. It killed your father.
Jaws: The Revenge is not one of the top 10 worst movies ever made, but if you've seen it, it probably is for you. I say that because I've seen a lot of movies, a lot of depraved movies, so I've seen a lot worse, but as far as sequels go with something as prolific in the title, you can't do much else wrong. The movie had a rush production, some blame the quality on that. I don't know how that relates to the concept here. It's obviously the lowest rated movie and the lowest grossing, but keeping all that in mind, I think it's a bit overhated. Wait, hold off, I agree, it's a bad movie, an awful movie, one of the dumbest ideas in movie history, but if you take the revenge theme out of the equation, it's still bad, but not much worse than the third movie. I mean, it's still worse and the only movie to perform badly, but as far as pure enjoyability goes, it's really just another dull shark flick. Joseph Sargent was the director this time, and he basically said the premise was born out of the desperation to find something fresh to do with a shark. I don't know how to respond to that. The idea makes equal sense to Sharknado, and honestly, that technically could happen. I mean, not really, but a shark could get picked up by a tornado and hit you, so a possibility. But a shark actively seeking revenge, that's not gonna happen. How anybody put the Jaws title on that premise is beyond insulting, but that doesn't make it one of the worst things ever. It's kind of like how the Beatles are overrated, as in they're not the absolute greatest band ever, despite being revolutionary. I'm not gonna make any bad movie comparisons because I will hear it, but I'll stand by it being overhated. Despite this, it doesn't have the same throwaway feel as Jaws 3. It basically disregards that movie. I don't know if it's meant to be standalone, but it seems they knew they messed up. Of course, that didn't help Terminator Dark Fate. It had the opposite effect. It does have a fresh start feel, so somebody was trying, and for those who never watched it, the cast is decent. Obviously, Scheider and Dreyfuss still said no. But the film has Michael Caine and Mario Van Peebles playing pretty significant roles, and for a fourth installment of this quality after a mediocre third installment, that's pretty sad. But not as sad as an original cast member returning. Lorraine Gary, who played Mrs. Brody in the first two fucking movies, actually reprises that role in this. Why? Because apparently she liked the idea of an on-screen romance with Michael Caine. Which is pretty damn ironic because that's the real issue with the film. The movie actually opens with a real shocking note. Sean Brody dies very violently. His arm literally gets ripped off. I can't call it a good kill because he decides to foolishly hang over the end. He could have possibly still lived if he didn't do that, but an unexpected death nonetheless. The problem is, for about an hour of the movie, nothing else happens. Coming in again around an hour and a half, it takes till the final third of the movie to get any kind of shark action. We just focus on Ellen and Michael Caine's character, Hoagie, kind of getting together. That's the plot of the movie. I'm dead serious. Michael has a wife too, they do stuff, but she could have been cut, honestly. You do see the shark, but until it attacks Michael's sub in the latter half, it doesn't do anything else. It's a fucking romance movie, it may not be what it's known for, but that's basically what it is. There are other things worth noting, like how the shark swam all the way to the Bahamas. If you don't know, sharks don't reside there. Despite Michael knowing the shark may be vengeful and seeing it clearly trying to kill him up close, he keeps going down there. I mean, literally the next day.
I'm scared shitless. What the hell am I supposed to do if I can't come back in that water?
What? Even though the shark clearly wants to only kill the Brody family, going as far as to not kill Hoagie in the climax, and I guess spit out Mark, it some reason kills a random person in one scene because I guess it was hungry. Maybe it's to lure Ellie out to, I think, sacrifice herself? Because apparently that would stop it? Do they have some kind of deal I missed? And the most insulting thing of all, they explain Martin Brody not being in the movie with this.
Dad died from a heart attack.
He died from fear. The fear of it killed him.
So the guy who faced his fear of water, killed 2 sharks, blew one up, electrocuted one, woke up one day, and died of a heart attack?
Son of a bitch!
Is this payback for not being in the movie? Are you taunting him with what he missed out on? It probably fucking is.
She's got the idea in her head that the shark that killed Martin and Sean is following the family.
There you go, fear killed him. Woke up one day and died of fear.
Son of a bitch!
The final dumb thing worth noting is the ending in which they blow the shark up by ramming it. In the original screening, they actually impaled it and it bled to death, a much more unique idea, as in not an explosion, and also not illogical. Kind of like how Jake originally didn't make it, because why would he? But the only reason they can see for changing it is to include the archive footage, which is kind of a nice touch. I mean, not considering how they got rid of him, that makes it insulting. But for what it is, they are decent scenes, and that's likely why they wanted an explosion.
Smile, you son of a...
With the impalement, that couldn't have happened, but still, I'm gonna prefer originality to copying something else. Also, I'm sorry, one other negative, the shark fucking roars. And I guess I gotta point out the effects being slightly better, but again, it's for an obvious reason. They're still not good, inferior to the first 2 movies, but due to having no 3D bullshit, it at least isn't that bad. So the best thing about this movie is stealing scenes from the first movie and not looking as bad as the third movie.
You done good. You done.
Jaws 4 is really an awful film. It's boring, it's stupid, it's beyond disrespectful, but I've still seen way worse. Honestly, if they really embraced the revenge narrative and made that more like half the movie, it wouldn't have been good, but it could have been so stupid it'd be entertaining. They instead seem to take the narrative seriously enough as if it could really happen, and try to actually make it into somewhat of a mature movie. That's why it's so bad, there's nothing fun about it, you're just confused as to why it got made. I think having Jaws in the title is why it's so hated, but that said, it's really fucking bad. To be honest, covering the latter 2 movies by themselves wouldn't be easy because their reputations are pretty accurate. Jaws 3 had so bad it's good potential but missed the boat. Jaws 4 is slightly overhated, as in not top 10 worst movie, but those aren't really unique takes. In the end, it's interesting to discuss, but the verdict is the same. The main downfall of both movies is being boring, not the effects, not the themes, just plain and simply not being fun. And Jaws 2 is the only sequel really worth watching, and the only one that I feel is underrated. The mixed reviews, ratings around 50%, are way too harsh. That's what you'll get if you look the movie up. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is rated higher, and you can't tell me that's okay. Yeah, it didn't need to exist, but it's still an enjoyable movie. I'm gonna assume by now you've seen the original Jaws. If some reason you haven't, I guess go do that. And my advice is to give the second movie a chance and leave it at that. The rest are not fun, they're not so bad they're good, they're just not worth it. And I like to say that's the reason they never brought the franchise back, but somehow, I still think they eventually will. I mean, it'd be a guaranteed third best movie, so who could turn that down? And if every other big franchise can keep pumping movies out despite how bad they've gotten, why can't Jaws join in the mix? In any case, happy 50th anniversary. Who knows how many weeks late? Possibly at least 2. I appreciate anybody who watched my previous Jaws video, and anybody who can share this one, it'd be equally as nice. I only say that because the algorithm doesn't do anything, so if you can hit the like button, subscribe if you enjoyed, it may at least get things kinda moving. A reminder again about the gaming channel, same content with games, find the link in the description. And all that said, I am the Analyst, and remember kids, a shark attack.